So in today's video, we're going to talk about opposition instructions in Football Manager. And I think the best way to talk about this is to actually go into a match and see how you can apply opposition instructions. Opposition instructions are an important part of modern football, and they're also an important part of Football Manager as well. You can use opposition instruction to control how your team defends against the opposition. You can use this to also mark out certain players from the game. An in-depth understanding of opposition instruction gives you an additional advantage over the opposition. And it's important to note that the AI is constantly using opposition instruction against you. So if you're not using it against them, you might be at a disadvantage. You also have to be careful how you use opposition instruction so that you don't disrupt your tactic completely. I have a game coming up here against Quilmes in the Argentina 2nd division. And just before we get into the game, we have to go over the opposition instructions and see how we can nullify the opposition. I'm setting up in a 4-4-2 against Quilmes, and Quilmes will be playing in a 4-3-3. So just to pause the game here, we can see that they have their 4-3-3 shape. They have their 3 midfielders, their 2 wingers. The other winger is somewhere far away on this downside here. And their striker, you have a back 4. The other, okay, let me just switch to the tactical camera so we can see everybody as it should be. And to be honest, I recommend using the tactical camera if you want to understand how your tactic is working and how the opposition is setting up against you. So this is how we have the shape here. We have our 4-4-2 and they have their 4-3-3 shape. Now, in order to analyze your position and understand how you can go about applying opposition instructions, you have to first of all go back to their team report and try to see who their key players are and how you can go about nullifying them. But before we get into that, let's look at the basics of opposition instructions. First of all, now that the game is paused, we're going to go back to the tactics screen. And in the tactics screen here on Football Manager 2026, the opposition instruction is here in the top right corner. Go ahead and click opposition instructions. We can see here on the left hand side that the assistant manager has given us a host of opposition instructions that we can go ahead and apply. I could just go ahead and click apply all advice, and that's just going to throw on some random instructions. But let's just get the basics right. There are 4 different opposition instructions in Football Manager. You have type marking, trigger press, tackling, and show onto weaker foot, or show onto any foot at all. Type marking is going to encourage your player to stay very close to the opponent. Trigger press is going to give the instruction that once that opposition player receives possession of the ball, the team is going to start pressing, or the closest player, to that opponent is going to start pressing. Tackling is what it says, how hard you're going to tackle. There are 3 options in tackling: normal, easy, and hard tackling. For the trigger press, in case I missed that, it's just the 2 options. Either you never trigger press a player, or you always trigger press a player. Yeah, you get the idea. Type marking is just the 2 options, never or always. I think it's only tackling that has 3 options. Okay, show onto foot has also 3 options, or 3 options, either left foot, right foot, or weaker foot. And in order to know the weaker foot of the player, you ought to have gone to their opposition report to actually see who the weak, or which player has a weak foot. So now that we know the basics, it's important that you look at the opposition's team report and know who their key players are and what those key players' strengths and weaknesses are, and then you can go about nullifying them using opposition instructions. Sadly, on Football Manager 2026, we can't actually leave this screen now and go all the way to your positions report and see who was going to be the key player. But the good thing is, now that we're in this screen, you can go ahead and just click the oppositions player and see what information they have on them. So now we see that Juan Ignacio Capano is a player that is playing on the right hand side, and he is a right-footed player. If you go ahead and click his foot, you can see that his weak foot is reasonable. The issue with a player that has a reasonable weak foot is that they might be able to use it, they might not. It's a 50-50 chance, as we can see here. But you want to look for a player that actually has a weak foot. So we can look at the other player that the opposition has in their team. Back to the opposition instructions. And the other winger is Juan Garcia. Okay. What's his name? Gabriel Carabajal. Very interesting name, to be honest. And he's supposed to be an attacking midfielder, but he's playing on the left-hand side. But if we look at his weak foot is also reasonable. So what this is telling me is that the opposition has players that are in attacking positions that have reasonable weak foot. So showing them to their weak foot may or may not have much difference in trying to stop them from doing what they want to do. But in case you go ahead and find a player that has a weak foot, then you can go ahead and start working. Let's look at Federico Perez. This is another player that is playing as a fullback for the opposition. Yeah, he's playing on the right hand side as a right fullback. So you go ahead and look at you can see that very perfect. He's a fullback, so he has weak foot. You can go ahead and show him to his left hand side and then force him to go on his left foot, which is not his stronger foot, and that way you can basically just nullify him. So you go over to show onto weaker foot here, and then ask your player to show Federico Perez to his weaker foot, and then that's what your attacker is going to do. Remember, we're playing with a 4-4-2 flat, well, with one defensive midfielder in the defensive midfield, and then the central midfielder is in the central midfield, but basically a 4-2-4 system. So one of our players will actually force the Federico Perez to go inside, and then we can try to press him from there. When it comes to type marking, what I like to do is look for players that are very good on the ball, that are very good at passing, and try to type mark those players. Now, Ivan Ramirez is the defensive midfielder here. He's likely going to be a defensive playmaker, but you only know that if you go ahead and click on the player. So let's look at Ivan. He is a defensive midfielder. His passing range is 11, vision is 10, so he's not much of a playmaker, and he's not the fastest player. You can see his acceleration is like 8 and pace is like 9. So we may not really want to mark him that much, but what we can do, however, is go ahead and ask him to, or go ahead and ask our player to trigger press him. Now, for the defensive midfielder, you can choose either use a trigger press on him. Go ahead and always trigger press him when the ball goes to him if you know that they are playing the ball to him. Because he's not the fastest, he may not be able to get out very quickly, so you can press him and get the ball. Alternatively, you can also use type marking and always type mark him. That way, the team is going to try to avoid playing the ball to him, being their main player, and they will try to play with players that are in maybe the central midfielders or players that are on the wings. So there we have players that can actually press and get the ball. So in case they have numbers in midfield, like 3 players here, I want to avoid them coming through the midfield. We can type mark the defensive midfielder, put him on always type marking. That's going to force the AI to play the ball to a different player that is not marked, and then we can go ahead and start pressing those players. Now, when it comes to the trigger press, you can go ahead and look at the defenders. And what I like to do for the trigger press is look for a defender that doesn't have very much composure. His bravery isn't great. This guy's bravery is quite good, Gabriel Aranda, but his composure and concentration is like 9, which is not very good. But we can look at his defensive partner, Maximiliano Padilla. I do like that name, to be honest. But his composure, determination is good. Composure is not so great, but bravery is good. Concentration is slightly better. So in case you want to trigger press someone, it's going to be Aranda. Go ahead and try to trigger press him, knowing that he's not very good on the ball. And you're going to start the press from there in case they play the ball to him. If you notice that the AI is playing out from defense, try to trigger press one of the center backs. It could help you force the possession and try to win it back from there. You can also apply trigger press on attacking players, but the issue with this is it's going to try to drag your fullbacks out of position. It may disrupt your shape. So I try to not really bother putting trigger press on the attacking players, except the central midfielders, for example. Like I mentioned, a player that has very good passing, like a player like this that has good vision, a player that has good long shots as well, Enzo Kalinski. He's one of the players that I would likely want to put on trigger press so you can stop him from taking a long shot. This other guy has vision 13 and pace, well, he has okay pace. Long shot is like 9. So rather than trigger press him, I'm going to go ahead and put him on type marking Mariano Santiago, and then you can put Kalinski on a trigger press or just leave him like that. When it comes to tackling, I like to look for players that do not have very good bravery. Now, the defenders usually have good bravery, so there's no point actually taking them on hard marking. If you look at Maximilian Padilla here, also very good bravery because he's a centre back. So there's no point putting him on hard tackling, knowing that you need to know that your strikers are going to be the ones tackling. So you have to keep that in mind. The striker is not really going to be able to hard tackle the centre back. That doesn't really work out like that. So putting a hard tackle on the centre back may not be very useful unless the centre back is a much weaker player. So when it comes to hard tackling, I tend to reserve this for strikers like this one Kaproof here. Bravery, quite good in a way, but you can put a type marking on, or you can put hard tackling on him, or normal tackling. Now you can see a player like Juan Caprano now, for example, his bravery is like 5 and concentration is also very bad. So what I would like to do in Caprano's case is just put a hard tackle on him. He's going to unsettle him throughout the game. And being an attacking midfielder on the right hand side, you can see that his concentration is not very good. So we can try to unsettle him, and he's also a PC player. So if I want to show him on his weaker foot, knowing that he has a reasonable weaker foot, you can just put it there for safety reasons. You don't really want to put the type marking on him because he's a very pacey player. So I just leave that in there and then not even bother with trigger press. Just leave him on hard tackling and try to just observe him during the match. That is another important aspect of opposition instructions. For players that have really good bravery, for example, you could still try to tackle them. But in this sense, you're going to select a sort of easy tackle that is not so intense. You can set it to easy tackle. Easy tackle is almost going to be like a standing tackle. Hard tackle is going to be like a diving, double-legged, sliding tackle. Then normal tackle, the player is just going to decide which tackle is best for that scenario and go ahead and use that tackle. So for this player that has maybe okay bravery, this 14, bravery for Padilla is like between 13 and 14, so not much difference. We're just going to leave one on easy. One more thing I like to mention when it comes to opposition instructions is that you can use it to tailor how your opposition is going to play out from defense. Like I mentioned with the defensive midfielder, you can choose to put him on tight marking. That will force your position to go out wide, and then you can start pressing from the wide areas. And to wrap it up, you can see that the top goal scorer here is Juan Caproof. What you will likely want to do for Juan Caproof is to actually put him on tight marking. The defenders are going to be the ones marking him, but be very careful when you're doing this because your centre back might get dragged out of position. If you notice that it's happening very often, just uncheck that option and allow your two centre backs to decide who gets to mark Caproof. Most assists is also from Juan Caproof, so he is a player that we need to keep an eye on. I will recommend putting him on tight marking at this point and also showing him onto his weaker foot. If we look at his player attributes, weaker foot, his current strength is his right foot, but also reasonable weaker foot. So not much showing for weaker foot there. But in opposition instructions, you can go ahead and just ask that weaker foot. In addition to that, you can go ahead and read everything that the assistant manager is recommending for you. You can see that we do best at trigger pressing Ivan Ramirez. Now, Ivan Ramirez is the defensive midfielder. Now, we chose to use type marking on him, but we can also choose to add the trigger press because they know that, or we know that the assistant or the goalkeeper of the opposition is going to try to play the ball there. So the assistant manager is thinking in that direction as well. We chose to use type marking. The assistant manager is recommended we use trigger press. You can use both options, but I noticed almost immediately from looking at the opposition screen that Ivan Ramirez was a weak link in the opposition, and the assistant manager agrees with that. We can also see that is recommending that we put a hard tackle on him, going in strong. If I go ahead and click confirm, the hard tackle goes on to a select. Kalinski is also a player that we should go ahead and mark tightly. There's Kalinski. What did we do for him? We actually ignored him throughout. But this, according to the assistant manager, he has good vision, good passing, maybe 12 for this division. The reason why the assistant manager is recommending type marking for him is that he's not the fastest player. In case you want to try and trigger press him, it's possible for you to catch up with him. But because he's a playmaker that is slow, kind of player, technical player, just staying on him like that might cause him to have a very bad game. So just putting him on always like that. With that being said, I'm going to just uncheck this option for Santiago because we chose to type mark Santiago, but the assistant manager is recommending that we type mark Kalinski instead, and that's fine. I can just go ahead and read that report and then decide for myself who goes or who gets the type marking. Remember, it's important that you actually watch the matches and see what is happening, and that is how we go about applying opposition instructions in Football Manager. I can go ahead and hit continue now. Here's the opposition trying to play out from the back. You can see that they have a defensive midfielder here. This is Ramirez, right? And we already have two players marking him. My two strikers are not really bothered about the center backs of the opposition that are going to receive the ball. They are just focused on this guy. But I'm not sure the goalkeeper is going to actually play the ball to him. He might avoid him because he's currently marked. This player here, my winger on this other side, or inside forward or wide forward, he is not tracking his man right now. So the goalkeeper may likely play the ball to this guy. That's because the fullback here is already marked. He may still play to the two center backs. But let's just see how the play actually unfolds. There's the pressing. We have the marking on the defensive midfielder. Immediately, he plays the ball to the player that I already knew is the least marked player. And that is because my wide forward on this other side, he is not tracking this man. So we've kind of forced the goalkeeper to avoid the player he wanted to play the ball to and play it all the way to this guy. And then since we're forcing teams wide, I do expect my wing back, my winger. I do expect my winger or wide forward to close this guy down, and then the press can continue from there. It's kind of how I go about opposition instructions. There it is. He goes back inside again, avoiding the defensive midfielder. Oh, they have played through our defense. Perez. Great block. Away by Garcia. Parisi. Meritello. Ramirez. Vallejo. So we successfully recycled possession there, and the play is complete. There it is.